Morning, everybody. I hope you're all well today. I'm afraid I'm full of cold, so there might be a little bit of coughing and spluttering, so I apologise for that in advance. Um, I'm David Rawnsley. I work for the UK Data Service. We are a distributed service around a number of universities in the UK, but also JISC, which is a not-for-profit, what can we call it? IT and services provider for the education sector. So uh, there's a very, very good chance that the internet you're using, if you're at university, or the Wi-Fi you're using at university, has been installed and is provided by JISC, for instance. If you're using library software, that's also probably written and provided by JISC. We used to be at the University of Manchester, and JISC sort of invited us to join them. So that's why our particular part of the UK Data Service is not at a university. Okay, so I think everyone can hear us. If not, there's a little bit of troubleshooting there, but I think everyone's okay. Okay, so we're going to start with a little quiz. There are no prizes, I'm afraid. Sorry. Just do this in your head. So in 2011, how many people in the UK identified their religion as Jedi? And according to the 2011 census detailed religion question, there were 176,632 people who identified as following the Jedi religion. And this is aggregate data. It's information about the characteristics of a group of people at a geographic level. Now, 2001 was the first time that religious belief had been included in the census since 1851. And in 2001, there were approximately 390,000 Jedi. I'm afraid in 2021, there were a few hundred and less than 1,600 recorded. So the Jedi religion has absolutely plummeted, I'm afraid. Sorry if you are one of those people. So aggregate data are data about populations, groups, regions, or countries. Examples of aggregate indicators are average life expectancy, employment rates, GDP, greenhouse gas emissions, or census headcounts. So aggregate data can be time series. So it can be taken maybe every year or every month, every quarter, or it can be a single point in time, which it is sort of what we think of the census as being, because although we hold the census every 10 years, the questions on it change, whereas a time series, it tends to be a standard set of questions asked each time. So the question on Jedi, it's probably not particularly useful to anybody, really, unless you're planning on founding a Jedi church. But what if the above diagram was your local area, and maybe the numbers represented households where you can identify single persons living alone, and maybe adding the characteristic that the person living alone was over the age of 60. Then, using that information, we could build up a picture of where the country could target resources for looking after vulnerable people who might be shielding from COVID-19 or any other upcoming pandemic. And then it starts to get useful, starts to have meaning. And we also start to introduce the concept of the universal population. So we could think of this as being the daytime population, maybe, or a workplace population as well. So the UK Census population is every 10 years. The first modern census that we understand as being most like the censuses we have today started in 1841. And the data is held secure for 100 years. And as of yet, nobody has been identified as an individual from the census aggregate statistics that are published. After 100 years, the questionnaire forms are made public. Unfortunately, they're sold to the highest bidder. So if you want to go and find out about your ancestors, you have to go and pay someone like Ancestry. But the aggregate data for the other 100 years is all freely available. We have digitized censuses from 1971. There is an ongoing project to digitize 1961, and we're hopeful to have that data in our systems next year. And if that goes well, then hopefully we can digitize 1951. There wasn't one in 1941. 1931, as much as possible. We lost a lot of the records, unfortunately, in the bombing of London. And 1921 as well. So if we can get 1921, we should have 100 years of census aggregate data. And we'll also have a bit of an overlap there, because we'll have the de-anonymized person level records, and we'll also have the anonymized aggregate data as well. Now, they've said that the 2021 census was the last ever traditional census, but they also said that about 2011. So we are waiting to see what happens. There are plans ongoing to work out population from all sorts of other sources, admin records, and some sample surveys. And whatever happens, there will be some form of census, and we will be working with the census providers to make that available. So we talk about a UK census, but there is no such thing really as a UK census. There are really 3.5 different censuses. So the Office for National Statistics looks after the census for England and Wales, but they can be slightly different. In Wales, they ask a question about the Welsh language, for instance, that are not asked on the English questionnaires. The National Records of Scotland, which used to be called GROS, the General Records Office of Scotland, they do their own census, and in fact, it was very different on the latest census, because they chose to delay by a year asking that census because of worries around COVID. And NISRA handle the census in Northern Ireland. Each nation has different geography types. They can ask different questions. Their outputs can be different. However, there is a core of harmonization. So for 2011, there is a UK harmonized data set, which it doesn't have everything from the census, but it has the core outputs. There is no harmonized UK data set for 2021/22 because Scotland haven't fully published all their data. But when that is, we will help ONS create that, and when that is available, we will have that on our systems. So, pardon me. The outputs from the census questionnaire take the form of aggregate data. That's what most people think of when they look at the census. So it's, number of people aged over 55 living in Salford who are Christian, for example. There's boundary data. So these are used to create maps of the census and administrative geographies that are used in the census, and with that you can add aggregate data or the other forms of data onto maps. There's also microdata, which are samples of anonymized person level records. These are safeguarded, but are available to all staff and students at UK HE and FE. There's also origin and destination data. So this is information about people who are moving and some of their characteristics. So people who travel to work, for instance, we will have where they live and where they work, or people who migrate. So into the country, out of the, well, not out of the country, into the country, and also around the country. We have a slight issue with that, which will have to be dealt with in shortly, which is that it's difficult to do migration between England, Wales, and Northern Ireland and Scotland because there was a whole year's gap. Similar for travel to work. People may have been working in England, living in Scotland, but there's a whole year gap there. So it's like that temporal shift. You can't really rely on that data. There is no de-anonymized personal level data. If you want that, as I've said, you have to wait 100 years. So the England and Wales census was held on the 21st of March, 2021. Incredible response rate, 97%. The majority of that was online. Almost none of that was traditional person-to-person form filling. And the average completion time for people using the online survey was 23 minutes. I did that. I thought it was an absolutely incredible piece of web writing. It was very clear and easy to use. Since then, they've had a census coverage survey, which checks that everybody around the country that has, well, not everybody, but it checks that there are enough people around the country and that have completed it. Also, a census quality survey, so going over, checking individuals and just making sure that the questions that they've answered correlate to who they are. And then there's a lot of output consultation with people who have a stake in the outputs of the census. So I was involved in the output consultation. Some of my colleagues were as well around the country. So we have an academic consultation group. There's a religious consultation group, a charity, and a local authority consultation as well. And just about every output has already been delivered from the 2021 census for England and Wales. Northern Ireland held on the same day, went through very, very similar system. Theirs was also deemed a very good survey. They've added things such as statistical disclosure control, so that and this happens to all of the census. So there is some form of data blurring happens so that people can't be identified as individuals. And there's a lot of work goes on with quality assurance. Scotland, roughly a year later, had a much lower response rate, 89.8%, which is actually deemed viable. But they had to have an extension period in order to get, and lots of extra advertising in order to get people to fill in their forms. It's believed that because it was a year later, people had kind of switched off, or they thought the census had already been done. But they got there eventually. Their first set of outputs was delivered, it says last summer, this summer, the summer that's just gone. We have those, the univariates. That's the most simple form of statistics that are delivered. And then the more detailed outputs, multivariates, will be delivered starting in 2025. So what can the census aggregate data tell us? Well, it's the single most complete source of information about the UK population. No other survey asks or is able to ask the amount of people that a census done. There are lots of surveys taken in the UK that ask more detailed questions, and they perhaps know more information about the individual or households, but they are such small samples. The UK census is almost every single person. And it can, well, I'm not going to go through that list, but as you can see, all sorts of socioeconomic data. In 2021/22, there were some new questions added for the first time. So all of the nations had a question on gender. It was a voluntary question. You didn't have to answer that. And each country had slightly different wording. So we've got England and Wales on the left, Scotland's on the right. England, Wales, and Scotland asked a question about sexuality. Again, voluntary. Again, slightly different way of asking it. And there was a question on veteran status. So people who have been in the armed forces. This question wasn't asked in Northern Ireland due to the perceived security risks and delicacy around the Troubles. There was also a new question on health conditions. This was only in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And there was a writing option for Scotland, which is very interesting. That could tell us more about perhaps the effects of COVID. There were more tick box options for Northern Ireland. So that'll be very interesting to see. What the census can't tell us, well, doesn't ask a question about wealth or income. We derive some information about, well, not wealth, but deprivation from some of the outputs around overcrowding, access to cars, things like that. And there's no personal identification, so there is data blurring and obfuscation. So if at the lowest level of geography you ask a question on people, age groups, maybe people between 20 and 24 who are Buddhist and who work in the manufacturing industry, that may only return one person in an area. So that will possibly identify someone. If you're perhaps looking for, well, I don't know, if you're looking for someone that matches those characteristics, you could possibly use the census to find them. So all of the census providers do sometimes record swapping. So they might, or they might add a small number. So a 1 might become a 2, or a 3 might become a 1, that sort of thing. Just so that it's almost impossible to actually find out where someone might be. This also means, you could say, that it's not 100% correct. That is true. It's not 100% correct. But it's near enough. So the census outputs are delivered in many different forms of geography. And we do geography absolutely awfully in this country. It's a complete and utter nightmare. So the building block for the census is called the output area. The output areas are not built until after the census. Output areas are supposed to be socially heterogeneous, so roughly the same sort of people in each output area, roughly. So they need to see the details of the census before they can start building them. They 2021 census output areas are very similar to the 2011, and again, census similar to the 2001, but very, very different from 1991. 1991 used something called enumeration districts with a different set of criteria for how they were built. They're not identical. So output areas from 2021 are not 100% identical. They will have changed slightly. Output areas are amalgamated to form super output areas, middle layer and lower layer super output areas. And these are constrained by obvious boundaries, such as very large roads and rivers, and also constrained by local authority boundaries as well. In Scotland, they call them a different name and they have slightly different flavours, and the same again in Northern Ireland. Of course, none of that relates to anything real. No one, well, I do, but almost no one in the UK knows what their output area code is. We know what our postcode is, we know what our address is, so that's difficult to relate to. We'll come on to that in a little bit, don't worry about that. Above the super output area geographies, we also have regions, counties, local authorities, wards that people have more idea of understanding. Wards relate to council ward areas, which then nest into local authorities. In England and Wales, we have the problem about we've got a dual layer system of local authorities. We have counties and districts. We also have unitary authorities, which don't nest into counties. So we have this idea, it's called UTLA and LUTLA, upper tier local authorities, lower tier local authorities. One's not socially superior to the other. It's just slightly larger, and one doesn't nest. Anyway, it's confusing. We can help with that if you need help. There's no postcode geography in the census at all, I'm afraid. However, we have a system called GeoConvert, which can be used to convert postcodes to any other sort of geography. So if you've taken your own survey, there's a good chance you've either got a postcode or a postcode area to identify that. We can convert that to a census output area or above. If you want, we can convert it to a national park if you want, and we use something called GeoConvert for that. I think we'll have a little bit more about GeoConvert later. So how do we access the census aggregate data? We've got two tools. We've actually got three, but we're retiring the third, so no need to worry about that. We've got two tools: Data Explorer and CCAN. You don't need to know what CCAN means. I don't even know what CCAN means. It's just the name of the software that we use. Data Explorer, it's unkindly, it's got the URL of international data because originally it was used for housing international data. Data Explorer is a software tool that is designed by a combination of organizations, world organizations such as the OECD, UNESCO, the National Bank of Belgium, Stats New Zealand, Stats Estonia, the Turkish Information and Statistical Division, all sorts of stats organizations around the globe, including the UK Data Service. We also are a member of this joint organization that creates the Data Explorer. And it does more than just show data on the web. It's actually used to create the data as well, to store it and disseminate it. So on our Data Explorer, we also have data from OECD, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, things like that. We are going to change the name of it to Data Explorer. And I've just noticed there's a typo there because there is no dash in between Data Explorer. It's just Data Explorer.uk Data Service. That URL is not live. and I can't see it being live until next year. There's all sorts of things we need to sort out about that. Don't worry, international data will keep working, and or Data Explorer will work as well. CCAN, so Data Explorer is more about exploring the data, obviously, hence the name. CCAN is about just storing masses and masses of data and the abilities to serve that out. So that's whole level. It's maybe if you want every output area for the United Kingdom, go to CCAN. That's the best place for it. We'll go into these interfaces in a little bit. So we currently have 71 and 2021 data in Data Explorer. Not all our 2021 data is in Data Explorer. We have little elves working behind the scenes right now, getting more and more in, and by the summer of 2025 we will have every published bit of 2021/22 census data in there, and possibly 2011, and then we will work on the rest. CCAN, we've got 2021, 2011. We have 71, 81 and 91 in there, but it's the 71, 81 and 91 data is it's in zip files, so you kind of have to download all of the census. But if you have any problems with that, we can help. So activity one, what we're going to do is I'm gonna walk through having a look at Data Explorer, and if you wish to join along, open up a web page, put in that URL, and we'll have a look at it. I'm just going to change the screen I'm sharing to show you. This is the front screen. I'm hoping you can see that. Let me know if you can see. If you can't see something that says UK Data Service Data Explorer. That sounds all right. That sounds okay. So that's our front screen. It's got a big search box. You can't miss it. Then we also have these little links to browse. So as you can see, international data in there if you're interested. When you search, it will search all the data sets, not just census, it will search all our international data sets as well. Or we can browse. We can browse our census topics. So what we'll do is we're going to browse demography. Click on demography. We'll go and find all the data sets that have been tagged up to as holding demographic data. And on the left here, you'll see some filters, and then on the right, that the search results that are returned by that. So it's found data from 1971 census and the census 2021 for England and Wales. If we pop down, you'll see there's 1971 census data there. What we're looking for is actually, what I'll do, I take off the 19s, no. If I click on the 2021 demographics, it'll get rid of the 71. And there we go. So a number of tables. I'm interested in TS006. All of the census data tables have a unique identifying code, population density. We can expand the information we have on that just so we can find out if it's what we want, and then we can click on the name. That'll send us to that particular data set. Okay. Still got the filters on the left-hand side. And we start with the three icons at the top here: overview, table, and chart. On the overview, it will tell you all about that particular data set, that particular table. So this data set provides Census 2021 estimates that classify usual residents, so people that usually live in that area, in England and Wales by population density, and that is the number of usual residents by square kilometre. And these estimates are as at Census Day on the 21st of March. Might have been completely different the day after or the day before, but on Census Day, this is the figures. Tells you that this is data only down to ward level. If you want finer level data than that, smaller geographies, you're better off going to CCAN, and there's a link there to the bulk download platform, so you can, and the exact population density data set. We have here something called a DOI. Doesn't matter what DOI is. All you need to know really is that this is really useful if you want to cite the data. A DOI will always point to this particular bit of data. We might change the URL. In fact, we are going to change the URL in the future. That doesn't matter. This DOI will always point to it. If I click on this now, it will take us to the catalog page for this particular data set. It's just going to catch up for a second. Okay, so here we are. Tells you all about this particular thing. You can go and view the full catalog, and there's a button there to access the data, and that will send you to wherever that data is currently being shown. Go back and find my page. Okay. So, and this is the form of citation that we would like people to use if they are going to publish any papers that involve this particular item of data. We've got information on the dimensions of the data that are, so it's usual resident population and the unit as well. So we have a definition for all our data. So usual resident population is anyone who on census day was in the UK and had stayed or intended to stay in the UK for a period of 12 months or more, etc., etc., etc. And then a little bit more about the dimensions and when it was last updated. We have some filters here that we could change. Not much use changing the census year because this is 2021. This is more useful for when we've got using our international time series data sets where we have time series data back to the 1940s in some cases. We can change the geographies that we're looking at and the bounding geographies as well. So that's the table overview or the table description. And we're going to change some of the filters. Actually, we'll get the table itself on. If you click on table, it will show the data. So this is the data. We've not applied any filters, so it's everything. So that's quite a long list. We are just going to look at England. So we're going to change it to English data only. Just going to go away and change that. We're going to change the geographic grouping. So we're looking at London boroughs, metropolitan districts. Again, this is the vagaries of UK geography. And non-metropolitan districts. These are all effectively the same thing. These are local authorities, councils. And we have a population density. So in the City of London, hardly anyone lives in the City of London because it's mainly financial institutions. 2,975 people per square kilometre. Tower Hamlet's 15,702. Now we've still got a lot of data here. We can change the labels on this, and this is quite useful. Probably not at this level, but lower levels. We can change to having identifiers. So we have unique identifiers for every aspect of the data. So we have it for the label for this particular geographic area, geographic groupings, and all of the geographies themselves. That's not probably very useful because you can't tell what these things are. But if we change that to both, That's really useful. And where it comes into its own really is if you've got smaller geography, so wards especially, you'll be amazed how many wards are called central. There are loads, or Cheapside, or Stratford as well. There are lots of Stratfords in the UK. So if you get a load of data called Stratford, and then you go and list them A to Z, you might lose some idea of which local authority or county these particular Stratfords or central areas are in. So I think it's best to have code and name. You don't need to do that for output areas. Output areas just have codes. They're that small and that numerous. Okay, so we've got our labels and codes there now. We can, if we want, change the layout. I'm going to change that. I'll apply that. It's not as interesting if we do that. So we've got our different types of geography in different columns. But I don't like that. So I'll go back to how it was. Apply that. Okay. We also have a download. We're not going to download that just yet. We have a button here that says Developer API. API is a application programming interface. It's a way of doing computer-to-computer connections. If you're using something like Power BI or R, those applications can consume an API query. And I'll just quickly show you what it's not meant for humans. So the data that you get looks like, let's have a look. I'll show it. It looks like this. It's got every single bit of information in there to describe the table we've just been looking at. Okay. If you want to build a program that utilizes the data, this is how you would do it. For most of us, we just want to look at something nice and simple. So if you want to use that, we've got all the documentation for it, or you can contact us and we'll help you do that. We've also got the ability to go full screen. So that looks better when we're looking at the table itself. Close down that. There. And the last of the buttons on the left-hand side is the chart button. The chart button will make more sense of this information because we can quickly then see smallest population density is, let's have a look, it's in a place called Eden. I believe that's Yorkshire, North Yorkshire. And the highest is Tower Hamlets in London. We can change some of this. We want to highlight Eden, we can, or Scarborough, etc. We can do all. Oh, did I do that? Yes. I chose some terrible ones to highlight. See if we can highlight something larger. London, Ipswich. That's not. There we go. It's better, hopefully. And we can change other aspects of the chart as well. Then, if we're happy with the data we've found there, we can download that or we can download the chart as a picture, or we can download the filtered data either filtered data as a CSV or as unfiltered data, so without all the data applied. So it's the whole of the unfiltered table, and those are in comma separated variable formats. If you go back to the table and do the download from there, you'll see that you can also download it as Excel as well. And that's it. That's how Data Explorer, as you can see, it's quite powerful, but it's pretty easy to use as well. You can't get into trouble. If you get into trouble, you're not happy with them, you can just get rid of your filters. and it'll just go back to showing everything. Or you can just go straight back to the search page and start again. You won't harm anything. There you go. I'm going to go back to my presentation now. Okay. So what's next in Data Explorer? So as I've said, we're putting data in all the time. All of 2021 for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, all of Scottish 2022 data as soon as it's available. We are working on 2011 and 2001. Those are in the pipeline, and someone's working on the planning for that. We are applying for some money to fund a project to look at the 1961 data. There's a unit at the University of Salford that's gone through and scanned all of the printed paper outputs from 1961, and then they've gone and quality assured that, and that even involves correcting issues that were originally published. So their 1961 data is more accurate than the data that was published in 1963, I think it was. So we're hopefully going to be working with them to get that data into Data Explorer. We'll then move on to getting 1991 and 1981 in there as well. Hopefully we're going to be able to add the ability to share data and charts to social media or via email. And also add in an option to map the data using boundary data, so you can create hopefully sort of interactive maps. So census bulk data. As I said, we use something called CCAN, but the URL is statistics.ukdataservice.ac.uk. This is whole tables for geographic areas, and there are far more geographic areas available in CCAN than in Data Explorer. Very easy to search, has all the metadata in there, and again, that's expanding all the time. But as we put new outputs become available, we get them into CCAN. So our second activity is something that you can do. Just try and find CCAN. Right, so I'm going to get CCAN up. But if you go to, I'm going to take I think www.statistics works, but if not, go to statistics.ukdataservice. In fact, can I edit that as we go? I will try. Yes, I will try and edit that as we go. Ooh. Just go back. Statistics.ukdataservice.ac.uk and find the gender identity table for England and Wales from we'll download the data, and we'll find out how many people were born in England, how many people arrived in Wales aged 20 to 24 years of age, and what units were used. Yeah, I don't think I can keep that on. Can I keep that on? I don't know. I don't think I can keep that. I'm going to share my CCAN screen though. Yes. Yes, I can. So this is CCAN. Statistics.ukdataservice.ac.uk. Again, huge search bar. We also have the ability to browse if you wish, but the search bar is the best way in this, and it's got a very powerful search. So after 21 data, which is 2021, we'll just put England, Wales, gender, and we'll see what that does. Hit enter. Okay, so it's come back with 357 data sets. Um, England and Wales Census 2021, TS078, that's the code for the table, gender identity. That's, I've just realised, we don't want the gender identity table. I am so sorry. We're not after gender identity. I think we are, that's something else. I was writing this yesterday and I've got mixed up. I do apologise. We're looking for age of arrival in the UK. We've changed that. Age, arrival, UK. You'll see why I was talking about gender identity in a second. Well, in a few minutes. Okay. If we search for age of arrival in UK, we're after TS018, age of arrival in the UK. We click on this. Actually, we'll go back. You'll notice we've got filters on the left-hand side for this as well. It's a slightly different format to Data Explorer, so we could narrow down our search, but it's not really needed because our search terms were good enough to go directly to that table. We could search by topic, search by unit, or search for data from, for instance, local authorities. But it's TS018 we're after. Always starts with an information screen about what's in the particular table, and then each of these links is for the data at a whole geographic level. So we've got NHS regions, for instance, upper tier local authorities, local tier authorities, output areas in two different formats. So we've got comma separated variables or something called JSON, slightly different format of how you view the data. We've got 2024 parliamentary constituencies, all sorts of things. We are just after country level data for England and Wales. So if you click on Explore, and we're going to do a preview for this. The preview for this works. It doesn't work for all of our data sets. We can go into that in a little bit. The preview is just a quick way of looking and checking that it's the sort of data that we want. You wouldn't be able to view it all. There's too much on our downloads at larger levels. But this has got England data, it's got Wales data, and it's got a number of different age levels. So that looks okay. So we can then download that. Now I've got Excel 365, so it's going to open up into an Excel web window for me. It might not for you. You might have to open it into your spreadsheet viewer of voice. So this is the full set of data. So the question was, how many people were born in England? So we've got England, we've got the country code as well there, a unique identifier. Born in the UK, so it's 46.87 million. 88 million, 46.88 million. 46.68 million, yeah, roughly. How many people arrived in Wales, aged 20 to 24? So Welsh data, aged 20 to 24, so 37,167. And what units are used? So the data that we have in CCAN is the data that was given to us by the data providers, and they all come in the format where there's data and metadata. So we have a separate sheet for the metadata with all sorts of information about this particular data set. And the unit of measure is persons, so individual people. So the second part of this activity is to find the national identity table for Northern Ireland. So I'm going to go back to CCAN, so I've got a little zoom tool at the top of my screen, which means I can't see the can't see my web tabs. Okay, so we're going to go back to our search screen and national identity island. Search for that. Okay, lots of those. We've got MSB 17, national identity, based on national identity, and MSB 29 is slightly different. We'll have a look at hopefully. Ooh, have we got B15? Yes. So we've got MSB15, which is national identity basic detail. That's what we would like. We'll click on that. More information tells you which part of the world it relates to. What we are wanting here is just to notice the difference, because Northern Ireland, separate census, they do things differently. So the levels at which the data are available are different. We've only got two for this: local government district and Westminster parliamentary constituencies. They don't release their data down at the finest levels of geography. If we do an explore on the local government, a preview, you'll notice it doesn't make much sense. You'll see why in a second. Okay, it's not available, and there's a reason for that. Now you'll see when we download it. So I'm going to download that data, and the metadata is on the first sheet. That's why we can't preview it, because it's not data, and our CCAN system doesn't understand it. The data is actually on the second sheet. But if we look at the metadata sheet, the format of it is slightly different. Still got all the information that you want. Tells you about the variables and how it's collected, all sorts of things like that. The disclosure control methods that we used. It also tells you the geographic referencing system it was used. Northern Ireland data, when you want to put it on maps, it uses the Irish National Grid system, which England, Scotland, and Wales doesn't. They use the British Isles system, so it's slightly different. But they use the Irish National Grid system, so if you want to connect ERA maps and Northern Ireland maps, they match perfectly. So if we have a look at the data itself, you'll see the data itself is slightly differently formatted. It's a better system. I think it's a more tabular system. We are going to work on all our data when we have time to make it look more like the Northern Irish data. So it's in a nice tabular system with geographies down one side and data on along the top. So we asked the question: how many people identified themselves as Northern Irish only in Fermanagh and Northern Ireland? So we can find this Northern Irish only, Fermanagh, and Omagh is down here. So it's 953. So it probably gives you an indication of why they don't allow the data down at lower levels. Still very sensitive about the troubles, still very sensitive about sectarianism. If you start to identify people, 953 people in the whole of Fermanagh and Omagh, you start to get down to fine levels, then people can start to get worried about being identified. So that's the difference that we have between Northern Ireland, England, Wales. Scotland itself will be a slightly different flavour as well. There's nothing we can do about it at the moment. That's how the census providers provide us with the data, but we will resolve that eventually. Okay, we'll go back to there was one other thing. So Gender identity. This is why I was talking about gender identity, and I shall go and show you that. We go back. Gender identity 2021. Gender identity, not the detailed one. We click on that. So why are you not showing me that? Come on. I want you to show me. There we go. There is an important notice on the gender identity. This particular set of data is no longer considered accredited official statistics. They made an error when they were coding it that people who answered all other sexual orientations were incorrectly coded to pansexual. That's wrong. They are going to produce a corrected table, but at the moment we've got this information on here, so you can still use this. In fact, if you want to use this, the detailed version is not affected, so use the detailed version of the gender identity table, because that is considered an official statistic for England and Wales. Okay. I shall share back to my presentation. Deprivation data. So we talked about the fact there's no questions on wealth or income, but we can derive deprivation data by use of census indicators such as room occupancy, house ownership, tenancy, car availability, and employment status, etc. And there are a number of different recipes for that. Carstairs. Sorry if you can hear a little beeping. That's my colleagues sending me messages. So Carstairs is primarily Scotland-based. It uses lack of car ownership, low occupational social class, overcrowded housing, and male unemployment to derive deprivation. That's because it was first used in the 1980s, and obviously, women didn't work in the 1980s, did they? Townsend scores. Sorry, that was sarcasm. Townsend scores. They use unemployment in the over 16s, non-car ownership, non-home ownership, and housing overcrowding. Carstairs and Townsend have not yet been calculated for 2021. I'm sure someone at some point will get around to it. We may have a project if we have some spare person to do that, or we might get a student in to do it. We don't know. There's also the index of multiple deprivation. These are national statistical attempts to derive deprivation. They use data from a number of different areas, not just the census. There are slightly different versions for England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland and Wales. Sorry. The CDRC Centre for I forgot what it means. The CDRC holds all of the data for that. The Consumer Data Research Centre, sorry, which is it's a unit based from staff at UCL, Leeds, and Oxford. The IMD, the latest one is 2019. It was the future of the IMD was under consultation. It was reported on in 2022, although I don't think it's been acted on. It was widely praised and supported by the community. We have IMD data ourselves in GeoConvert, and I'll speak about that later. So we like IMD. We find it a very useful ready reckoner for deprivation in an area, and are hoping that there will be another round of IMDs in the future. So matching geographies, we talked about GeoConvert. I'm not going to show it you. Well, actually, I'll very quickly show you the front page just so you can see the sorts of things it can do. I'll share that. And here we go. So this is actually, that's the front page, tells you a bit about it. This is what it can do. It can tell you information about postcodes. You can match one geography to another. It doesn't have to be postcode to something. It can be something to postcode. It can be local authorities to national parks. It could be Westminster constituencies to local authority wards. Anything to anything. If you have data attached to that geographies, it can make an attempt at converting or resampling that data to your new geography. You have to have a think about what you're trying to do. If you've got a few samples for areas around Sellafield, for example, people with incidents of cancer around Sellafield nuclear power station, if you then re-aggregate that to the whole of the UK, you might find that everybody seems to have cancer in the UK. So that's not going to work. Okay, but if you're sensible, it can convert data from one geography to another. Just reshare my presentation. So it uses address points to calculate an area population. It uses some very clever proportioning and then caveats. Yeah, think about what you attempt to do, and also the fact that postcodes change. There are different versions of the postcodes that you can use to make these conversions or matches. We are currently, at this very minute, developing version 2 of GeoConvert. Version 1 used something called the NSPD, National Statistics Postcode Directory. Version 2 will use something called the National Statistics Postcode Lookup. This is accepted as the official way to do postcode geography lookups, and is used in all nationally produced accredited statistics. So we are going down that route. It is not as clever as the NSPD, but it's simpler and it's in use by ONS, etc. So that should be ready. GeoConvert should be ready, or the initial release should be ready in, let's say, April of next year. We are not the only people who produce census data. I'm not going to say we're the best either. Between us, we all do something slightly different. So the ONS, NISRA, and the NRS are the official census agencies, and they all have census data on their sites. And what they are really good at is you can flex their data. If you want to go and, if you can't find data on, for instance, I don't know, religion by occupation, by social class, I don't know if that's a thing, but you can go and see, you can go and put those classifications in and create your own table. And it will, if that table isn't available, it will create it for you. There are some things that it stops you doing. It might not give you the data at the lowest level if it thinks it's disclosive, but it will give you what it thinks it can. They're brilliant at that. However, the census agencies, they might stop doing this in a couple of years. So we're never quite sure how long they hold on to their data. They certainly don't have 71 data, 81 data, 91 data, for instance. They kind of get bored of it after a while, and they, quite rightly, they're moving on to the next thing. You know, they're already thinking about the 2031 census. NOMIS are a bit like ourselves. They do hold on to the data. They're very good at keeping old data sets. They're funded by the ONS. Their website is very good. I'm going to admit that it's very good. I don't think it's as nice for searching for data though. So If you can't find what's the data that on our site, go and have a look at NOMIS. I think that's the end of the talk really about the census that we hold. Um, just to let you know about the data service itself. I mean, you must know a bit about it. You've managed to get yourself booked on this course, but the UK data service is funded by the ESRC, and it holds an enormous range of socioeconomic data. And if you are doing some research funded by the ESRC, you will be asked to deposit your data with the UK data service. So it's not just official statistics, it's all sorts of other researcher derived data as well. It offers support training and guidance on using all the data that it holds, and it has all sorts of things on its website. I'm not going to read that out. Pardon me. One of the things on there is the Census Learning Hub. All sorts of information there about how to use the aggregate data, how to use flow data, microdata, how to map data with R, how to map data with a platform called QGIS, how to use census boundary data as well, how to access it. Lots and lots of really useful stuff on the Census Learning Hub. We also have loads and loads of videos available on YouTube. This will be on YouTube. All our courses are on YouTube, and all sorts of other guides as well. We also have data skills modules. If you have zero ability at using data, we can take you through using how you access and how you can better use that data as well. And I think this is the last slide actually. So I'd like to show this. This is we've seen that aggregate data are data that have been derived from individual level data. It's pulled together so that a larger pattern and trends can be seen. Aggregate data is often data about different groups of people or regions, collected for administrative purposes by central banks, national statistical officers, and local and central government departments use aggregate data to identify how and where they should be using public resources. They use the information to check how different groups in the community are affected by existing policies and to inform future policy changes. So this is the UK budget, and each of those little strands is a tiny destination for taxpayers' money. And how do they determine where that goes and who gets it? It's on a per capita basis, essentially, derived from census data. It's a close up there. And that's it. So a few links to end. And if there are any questions, yes, well, thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for coming. And I hope you have a lovely day and make use of census data. That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone.